The Green Hills of Earth by Robert A. Heinlein. 1. This is the story of Heinlein, the blind singer of the Spaceways, but not the official version. You sang his words in school.
I pray for one last landing on the globe that gave me birth. Let me rest my eyes on fleecy skies and cool the green hills of Earth.
Or perhaps you sang in French or German, or it might have been Esperanto, while Terra's rainbow banner rippled over your head. The language does not matter. It was certainly an Earth tongue. No one has ever translated Green Hills into the lisping Venerian speech. No Martian ever croaked and whispered it in the dry corridors. This is ours. We of Earth have exported everything from Hollywood crawlies to synthetic radioactives, but this belongs solely to Terra, and to her sons and daughters, wherever they may be. We have all heard many stories of Heinlein. You may be even one of many who have sought degrees, or acclaim by scholarly evaluations of his published works. Songs of the Spaceways, the Grand Canal, and other poems, High and Far, and Up Ship. Nevertheless, although you have sung his songs and read his verses, in school and out your whole life, it is at least an even money bet, unless you are a spaceman yourself, that you have never ever heard of most of Heinlein's unpublished songs. Such items as, Since the Pusher Met My Cousin, That Red-Headed Venusberg Gal, Keep Your Pants On Skipper, or A Spacesuit Built for Two. Nor can we quote them in a family magazine. Heinlein's reputation was protected by a careful literary executor, and by the happy chance that he was never interviewed. Songs of the Spaceways appeared the week he died. When it became a bestseller, the publicity stories about him were pieced together from what many people remembered about him, plus the highly colored handouts from his publishers. The resulting traditional picture of Heinlein is about as authentic as George Washington's hatchet or King Alfred's cakes. In truth, you would not have wanted him in your parlor. He was not socially acceptable. He had a permanent case of sun itch, which he scratched continually, adding nothing to his negligible beauty. Van der Wert's portrait of him for the Harriman Centennial edition of his works shows a figure of high tragedy, a solemn mouth, sightless eyes concealed by black silk bandage. He was never solemn. His mouth was always open, singing, grinning, drinking, or eating. The bandage was any rag, usually dirty. After he lost his sight, he became less and less neat about his person. Noisy Heinlein was a jetman, second class, with eyes as good as yours, when he signed on for a loop trip to the Jovian asteroids in his RS Goshawk. The crew signed releases for everything in those days. A Lloyd's associate would have laughed in your face at the notion of insuring a spaceman. The Space Precautionary Act had never been heard of, and the company was responsible only for wages, if and when. Half the ships that went out further than Luna City never came back. Spacemen didn't care. By preference, they signed for shares, and any one of them would have bet that you could jump from the 20th floor of Harriman Tower and ground safely, if you offered him 3-2 and allowed him rubber heels for the landing. Jetmen were the most carefree of the lot, and the meanest. Compared with them, the masters, the radarmen, and the astrologators, there were no supers nor stewards in those days, were gentle vegetarians. Jetmen knew too much. The others trusted the skill of the captain to get them down safely. Jetmen knew that skill was useless against the blind and fitful devils chained inside their rocket motors. The Goshawk was the first of Harriman's ships to be converted from chemical fuel to atomic power piles, or rather, the first that had not blown up. Heinlein knew her well. She was an old tub that had plied the Luna City run, Super New York Space Station to Layport and back, before she was converted for deep space. He had worked the Luna run in her, and had been along on the first deep space trip, dry water on Mars and back, to everyone's surprise. He should have made chief engineer by the time he signed for the Jovian loop trip, but after the Drywater Pioneer trip, he had been fired, blacklisted, and grounded at Luna City for having spent his time writing a chorus and several verses at a time when he should have been watching the gauges. The song was the infamous "The Skipper is a Father to His Crew," with the uproariously unprintable final couplet. The blacklist did not bother him. He won an accordion from a Chinese barkeep in Luna City by cheating at one thumb, and thereafter kept going by singing to the miners for drinks and tips, until the rapid attrition in spacemen caused the company agent there to give him another chance. He kept his nose clean on the Luna run for a year or two, got back into deep space, helping give Venusberg its original ripe reputation, strolled the banks of the Grand Canal when a second colony was established at the ancient Martian capital, and froze his toes and ears on the second trip to Titan. Things moved fast in those days. Once the power pile drive was accepted, the number of ships that put out from the Lunaterra system was limited only by the availability of crews. Jetmen were scarce, the shielding was cut to a minimum to save weight, and a few married men cared to risk possible exposure to radioactivity. Heinlein did not want to be a father, so jobs were always open to him during the golden days of the claiming boom. He crossed and recrossed the system, singing the doggerel that boiled up in his head and chording it out on his accordion. The master of the Gostock knew him. Captain Hicks had been an astrogator on Heinlein's first trip in her.
Welcome home, Noisy. Are you sober, or shall I sign the book for you?
You can't get drunk on the bug juice they sell here, Skipper. He signed and went below, lugging his accordion. 10 minutes later he was back. Captain, that number 2 jet ain't fit. The cadmium dampers are warped.
Why, tell me. Tell the chief.
I did, but he says they'll do. He's wrong. The captain gestured at the book.
Scratch out your name and scram. We ready ship in 30 minutes.
Heinlein looked at him, shrugged, and went below again. It's a long climb to the Jovian planetoids. A Hawk-class clunker had to blast for 3 watches before going into free flight. Heinlein had the second watch. Damping was done by hand then, with a multiplying vernier and a danger gauge. When the gauge showed red, he tried to correct it. No luck. Jetmen don't wait. That's why they're jetmen. He slapped the emergency discover and fished at the hot stuff with the tongs. The lights went out. He went right ahead. A jetman has to know the power room the way your tongue knows inside of your mouth. He sneaked a quick look over the top of the lead baffle when the lights went out. The blue radioactive glow did not help him any. He jerked his head back and went on fishing by touch. When he was done, he called over the tube.
Number 2 jet out, and for Christ's sake, get me some light down here.
There was light, the emergency circuit, but not for him. The blue radioactive glow was the last thing his optic nerve ever responded to.
To be continued.
Hey Jack,
Hey, Rob.
have you heard of Dead Zone, the podcast before?
Yes, I have. And where would we find that?
That would be at deadzonegame.podbean.com.
Dead Zone the podcast. Come to deadzonegame.podbean.com to check us out. News, reviews, a lot of talking. Come check out the Dead Zone.